Today we're off in search of the sandpaper fig tree that's quite common in Townsville. What I want to know is, can you use the leaves of this sandpaper fig for actually sanding? So that's what we're going to find out. So I'm hoping to collect some leaves and take them home and try some sanding out with them. So I'm here at Macaranga at the where the old, there's a windmill here, sorry, a wind turbine, and last year I saw some sandpaper figs in this area, so hopefully I'll be able to find them again and we can collect some leaves. I found one. Here's one right in the start of the path. You can see it's got these sort of elliptical shaped leaves, and the leaves are really quite rough on one side, and these are a little bit furry on the underside. And we can see this one has quite a few, has fruits on it. I was hoping to find a ripe fruit today so we could actually try one out. The fruit off this sandpaper fig, which is Hibiscus opposita, is supposed to be one of the sweeter native figs and quite edible when they're ripe. So they're ripe when they're sort of like almost dark red and black. And yeah. So this tree was also used for quite a few other purposes. The leaves themselves and the sap were used to also treat tinea, apparently. So when you cut and you get some white sap, that was used as a treatment. And also the wood was used to start fires. So we'll give that a go as well. So now I'm going to try and see if I can cut off one of these fruits and see what it's like on the inside. Let's see. Let's try. Alright. So you can see like there's this white sap which has come out quite easily. Okay, well let's try cutting this one open even though it's not ripe, just to have a look and see what it looks inside. It's actually really quite hard to cut through. You can see some of the seeds in this one. Okay, let's collect a few leaves that we can use for our sandpaper experiment. Now this particular fig tree comes in all different sizes. It's quite variable. I've seen it down in North Keppel Island where it was on a windswept hill, and on that hill it was like really low and stumpy. Here we've got a fairly typical sized one, and apparently there are male and female plants. The male plants are much bigger, and the fruit themselves doesn't actually ripen. So this one I'm not entirely sure. It's a mid-sized one. It doesn't seem to have much ripe fruit, but it might just be the wrong time of year. As you can see, this whole area is very, very sandy, and the reason is that this area would have previously been underwater. And you can tell by looking at the satellite imagery that the you can see like these rows that show where the previous coastline was. And it got infilled, obviously, through, I don't know, thousands of years with sand, and then all the plants basically came in and grew in this area. But it does mean that because of all the sand, it's obviously got quite a unique distribution of plants. Well, I found another sandpaper fig. This one is a little bit taller, and the fruits on it are a little bit riper, but they're not particularly ripe. So you can see that they're a little bit red, but when you squeeze them, they're still rock hard, so that's no good. And one thing you got to look out for is all the green ants. There. This one. Another species that's common in this area is the Macaranga. That's also known as elephant's ear. You can see the shape of the leaves, looks a bit like, I guess, an elephant's ear. The stalk of the leaf comes in sort of to one side. It's not a heart shape, but it has like this pointed oval shape. I'm not sure the technical term. But this species, you'll find it all throughout Townsville. I've got one in my yard, and it's kind of like a pioneer species. It rapidly grows and sort of provides a foundation for other plants to come into an area. But I found that if you disturb the main tree, it has roots that go out for quite a fair way, and then they shoot up suckers and you get all sorts of them growing everywhere else. But it's a good native species that's easy to grow in this area anyway. Behind me we've got a huge sea hibiscus, and it's unfortunately not flowering at the moment, but I'll show some of its flowers from photos that I've taken previously. These ones seem to be quite widespread throughout Queensland, and you tend to find them on sort of wetlands and also along beachfronts. They're quite common. These ones do have a sort of a heart-shaped leaf where they join at the tip of the heart, and they've got an interesting growth form on the end of their branches. And one key way of picking them is if you can find any seed pods. These seed pods have this sort of shape, so that lets you know that it's actually the sea hibiscus. So I'm just here at the Rose Bay boardwalk now, and let's have a quick walk along and see what we can find. We've got some more Macaranga here on the side. This is the other plant that I really wanted to see today, the Pendennis. This particular one is very large and has some really nice fruit on it. Identification of Pendennis seems to be a bit problematic. Every book I've read seems to say there's issues with the identifications, and I've tried trying to determine what the different species are. These particular plants seem to have a very strong spiral leaf structure on their trunks, and so I assume that this might be Pendennis spiralis, but I'm not quite sure. I'm happy to be corrected on that one. The fruit of the Pendennis is quite edible, and apparently it has seeds inside that you can also eat. It's very fibrous and apparently tastes like artificial banana. I was hoping that I could try and get one segment off these fruits, but wow, they're very firm. Well, I did want to try one segment. This is basically rock hard. I don't want to damage or take more than is necessary. Perhaps it's so rock hard because they're not ripe, I'm not sure. So I'll have to leave it for today and maybe come back in a few months and see if it's any easier then. I found an interesting weed that I'd like to point out. This particular plant is called a castor bean plant, and it's particularly toxic. So in its seeds, it has ricin, which is an incredibly potent toxin that requires very small quantities to kill you. I'm going to head back now since the sun is getting a bit low, and we'll try out the sandpaper fig, see whether it really does sand at all. Well, I'm back at home, and now what I'm going to do is try and see if the sandpaper actually works. So here I've got some pine, and I've got the sandpaper fig. Let's take the leaf off. Now let's see about this rough edge. Now, just for comparison, I've grabbed some tuckaroo leaves, which are not sandpapery at all, and we'll see whether on the other side has the same effect. Well, let's have a look at the handiwork. Well, the sanded edge from the sandpaper tree is very slightly sanded, and this corner is a little bit rounded, versus the tuckaroo, which also kind of got sanded, though probably like quarter as good or half as good. So I guess the conclusion is that you can sand with sandpaper, sandpaper fig, but it's probably best for polishing rather than heavy sanding. Now I want to try one other thing. Apparently sandpaper fig branches were used to start fires. Here I've got two branches that came off a sandpaper fig that I had in the backyard that we had to remove because it was huge. It was 10 meters and towering over the house. But these ones are pretty dried out, so I thought I would see now whether I could start a fire, but I'm not expecting to be able to start a fire, but I'm just curious as to see if I can generate any heat. So first off, I think we're going to need a bit of a groove, because if we just get this stick and rub it, it'll tend to slide off the side. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and drill a few holes to encourage a groove. Got to catch my breath. Well, clearly my technique is not perfect, but I did manage to see a little bit of smoke. So I presume that if you had the groove done right and you had something dry to pick up that smoke and tinder, then you probably could make a fire with this stick. Anyway, that's all for this episode, and I'll catch you next time.